Hello and welcome, and today we'll be talking about the optimisation of neural models. So this project, it says optimisation of neural models. What is a neuron? Well, basically, a neuron is part of a nervous system, and it's the cells that allow us to move throughout. So it passes electrical impulses around our body. And when we set this project, we didn't really know what was involved or where to go and where to start. But after reading around a little bit, we decided we could quite easily split it into two sides. One side being the biology and one side being the maths. So myself, John and Hannah, we set about looking at the biology, and Seth, Ruth and Ruben worked on the maths problem. In the biology, as a very basis, we have this, which is called the Reflex Arc. And basically this is where, if there was a fire or a bumblebee, when you put your hand in a fire, we take it out, but we don't think about doing that. Nobody's ever gone, oh, ow, and then move their hand. And basically that's because we've got receptors in our skin, and that passes an electrical message along our sensory neuron to either our spinal cord or our brain, which will then send another message along the motor neuron back to our muscle, which gets us to move our arm so we don't burn ourselves. And this all happens subconsciously because of neurons, which Hannah's now going to elaborate on.
On the screen, you can see two images of a neuron cell. There are three main parts to a neuron: the dendrite, which contains the nucleus of each neuron, the axon, which is protected by the myelin sheath, and the axon terminal. The electrical signals involved in the reflex arc are induced in the dendrite and then travel through the axon towards the axon terminal, where they become chemicals to diffuse across the gap to the dendrite of the next neuron, where they become electrical again. However, the electrical signal doesn't travel through a current, as is the case in a standard circuit. Instead, the signal occurs due to the process of ion exchange, which John will explain further.
So, how does the electrical impulse travel across the neuron if there is no actual current generated between both terminals? Well, through ion exchange. Ion exchange takes place within the axon between the intra and extracellular fluid, or the inside and the outside of the cell, which is separated by this semi-permeable membrane, which consists of these ion gates. When the pulse is passed into the neuron, the sodium gate, which is this blue one, opens and allows sodium ions into the inside of the cell, increasing the concentration of positive ions in the inside of the cell, generating a potential difference across the membrane. This potential difference then results in the next gate opening, which would be further along the membrane, and then the next, and so on, in a domino effect. The potential difference, once the impulse has travelled through the cell, the potassium gate opens, which is this yellow one, and allows the potassium ions into the outside of the cell, leaving the resting potential again as the charges balance. And here you can see the signal as it travels through the axon.
Okay, so our problem is based on calculating the firing times of neurons using the leaky integrated fire model. This was first developed by Louis Laprie, a French physiologist, in 1907, and he discovered the relationship between electrical current and nerve stimulus by applying current to dead frogs' legs and seeing which muscles would twitch. He related this relationship to a simple electric circuit with a resistor and capacitor in parallel. This allowed him to produce equations to describe his findings. The idea was later developed on by Alan Hodgkins and Andrew Huxley in 1952, and their equation describes how the voltage changes with time in each neuron. This can be shown in the graph where the voltage travels from 0 to 1 volt, where 1 volt is the threshold voltage when the neuron would fire. Our problem was to calculate the values of Kn in the bottom equation here. This was quite tricky, and we didn't know a lot of the maths to be able to solve this, So we had to do some research before we could get started.
The maths behind this biology starts with the model we were given. For the purpose of our task, the value of tau, the capital T, is equal to 1, meaning we can largely ignore it for our problem. The first step to solve our problem is to get the model to a point where we can easily input values and solve it. The maths behind this is quite complicated, so I will follow the main steps. Trying to fully explain everything would take time that we just don't have, so if you want a better explanation, please turn to our poster. We start by multiplying both sides by the exponential of t. By taking it as an integrating factor, this allows us to reverse the differentiation easily. We then integrate and simplify to give this equation. From this, we can put the equation for the current that we were given in the problem and split the function into its constituent parts. These can then be integrated in a general form and simplified. Finally, we can substitute our values for t star, which we were given in the question, into our formula. To do this, we substitute one value and take away the same part, but with the previous t star value, to give us the difference between them. Doing this creates 3 simultaneous equations with 3 sets of coefficients for the 3 different constants. To make our lives easier, these simultaneous equations can be created by this code.
In our first attempts at creating the 3 simultaneous equations, we tried to calculate the coefficients of K1, K2, and K3 by hand. However, the problem with this was that it was error-prone, because we were all human and made mistakes, and it could take us up to half an hour to form the 3 simultaneous equations. So I decided to speed up the process by creating the Python script, which you can see above, which allowed us to do the same work that we were doing by hand in 5-10 seconds. It also allowed us to edit how we were creating the simultaneous equations easily and quickly by just editing a few lines of code. The code is actually comprised of a singular function, which was created, which takes the differences between 2 t star values as parameters. It then will iterate through the necessary equation 3 times while altering the equation to create the 3 unique values. This process creates the coefficients for K1, K2, and K3 for the differences between 2 t star values, which are all then stored in a list. After calculating the coefficients, the program then completes the other side of the equation and formats this data into a string. The string was set out to match the standard layout of an equation with 3 unknown variables. Once formatted, the string can then be outputted to the user, and once outputted, the 3 simultaneous equations can then be easily solved either by hand or, as we did it, using Wolfram Alpha. And by solving these 3 simultaneous equations, we were given these values for K1, K2, and K3, which were the final answers for the problem.
To conclude, we found out what a nerve is, which is a cell that passes electrical impulses around the body. We looked into it and we discovered this happens through ion exchange. We then started on the maths, learnt some more maths that we didn't know before, used Python code so we could do it more quickly, and we got the answers. We'd like to give a massive thank you to Dr. Carl Wedgwood, who set us the task 3 months ago, and a massive thank you to Louise Haggart, who's helped us all the way through the project. If you've got any more questions, come and find us and read the poster at the end, and we hope we didn't get on your nerves too much.